The news started circulating in that familiar way that only football rumors do, whispered first in back channels, then growing louder as insiders pretended not to know anything while knowing everything. The idea of Aaron Charles Rodgers leaving the Pittsburgh Steelers felt unreal at first, almost like a bad joke told in a locker room after practice. Yet the tone around the team shifted, and suddenly the phrase official statement was being murmured with a seriousness that demanded attention. As a YouTube narrator would say, this is the kind of moment when you lean closer to the screen because something big is clearly brewing beneath the surface. Rodgers, a quarterback whose name alone carries weight, leadership, and a sense of control over the huddle, has always been more than just a player. He is a presence. When someone like that is linked to a possible exit, even under the label of an official communication, the implications stretch far beyond a single roster move. Fans began reading between the lines, dissecting tone, pauses, and carefully chosen words, wondering if this was truly a farewell or just a strategic maneuver dressed up as transparency. The Steelers, an organization known for stability and tradition, suddenly felt like a stage for uncertainty, and Rodgers stood at the center of that narrative storm, calm, calculated, and silent. As the rumor gained momentum, the story took on a life of its own, fueled by speculation rather than confirmation. The so-called official communication did little to quiet the noise, because in the world of professional football, clarity often creates more questions than answers. The wording was vague enough to spark debate, yet firm enough to suggest that change was imminent. Observers began to wonder whether this was a mutual understanding between player and franchise, or a subtle indication of philosophical differences that could no longer be ignored. Aaron Rodgers has always been known for his intelligence and independence, traits that inspire teammates but can challenge organizational comfort. The Steelers, meanwhile, pride themselves on structure and continuity. When those two identities collide, the result is rarely simple. In YouTube-style commentary, this is where you pause and remind viewers that football decisions are rarely about performance alone. They are about culture, timing, and the delicate balance between respecting a veteran's voice and maintaining a unified direction. The rumors suggested that something had shifted internally, and that Rodgers, despite his stature, might have reached a crossroads with the team. Fans reacted with a mix of disbelief and guarded acceptance, emotions that reflect just how impactful Rodgers has been since arriving in Pittsburgh. Even without concrete details, supporters began imagining scenarios, each more dramatic than the last. Some believe this was a power play, a message sent through the media to force a renegotiation of influence or role. Others felt it was the natural end of a chapter that, while significant, was never meant to be permanent. In a narrative voice meant for YouTube, you would emphasize how sports fandom thrives on these moments of uncertainty, where hope and anxiety coexist. Rodgers represented confidence under pressure, the kind of quarterback who could command a game with subtle adjustments and quiet authority. The idea of him stepping away from the Steelers created a vacuum that people rushed to fill with theories. Was the team preparing for a new identity? Or was Rodgers seeking a situation more aligned with his vision of the game? The rumor did not answer these questions, but it made them impossible to ignore. Inside the organization, silence spoke just as loudly as any statement. Coaches, players, and executives avoided definitive language, which only added fuel to the speculation. The Steelers have long been associated with loyalty, both to their stars and to their internal processes. Letting go of a quarterback like Rodgers, or even entertaining the possibility, suggested a shift that felt almost philosophical. In a spoken narrative, this is where you slow down and let the weight of history settle in. Rodgers is not just another name on a depth chart. He is a player who influences preparation habits, locker room dynamics, and even how opponents plan their week. The rumor of his departure hinted at deeper conversations about the future, about how much longer the team wanted to rely on veteran leadership versus embracing uncertainty. For Rodgers, the silence might have been strategic, a way to let the organization reveal its hand. For fans, It was an uncomfortable reminder that even the most stable franchises are not immune to upheaval. Media personalities and content creators began framing the situation as a chess match rather than a breakup. The language around the official communication was dissected word by word, as if hidden meanings could be unlocked with enough repetition. In YouTube fashion, this became less about what was said and more about what was not said. Rodgers has always been careful with his words, aware of their impact, and the Steelers are equally cautious when addressing sensitive matters. The rumor suggested that both sides were positioning themselves, preparing for multiple outcomes without committing publicly to any single path. This created an atmosphere of suspense where every practice clip, every sideline interaction, and every facial expression became evidence in a case that no one had officially opened. The narrative shifted from shock to anticipation, as people began to accept that change, in some form, was likely coming. At the heart of the rumor was a simple but powerful idea: legacy. Aaron Rodgers has spent his career crafting an image of excellence, control, and competitive fire. The Steelers have built their reputation on resilience and continuity. When those two legacies intersect, the outcome matters deeply to both sides. The possibility of Rodgers leaving raised questions about how each wanted to be remembered in this chapter of their stories. In a YouTube-style closing to this part of the narrative, you would remind viewers that rumors often reveal truths not yet spoken aloud. Whether the official communication marked the beginning of the end or merely a moment of recalibration, it forced everyone to confront the reality that nothing in professional football is permanent. The Steelers and Rodgers stood at a crossroads, and even without clear answers, the direction felt closer than ever. As the rumor continued to evolve, the conversation shifted from shock to analysis, with fans and commentators alike trying to read the emotional temperature of the situation. Aaron Rodgers has always projected calm confidence, but those who follow the game closely know that beneath that exterior lies a fiercely independent thinker. The idea of him stepping away from the Pittsburgh Steelers was framed less as a rejection and more as a divergence of paths. In a YouTube narrative tone, this is where you remind the audience that great partnerships can end without bitterness, simply because timing and vision no longer align. The official communication, though sparse, carried an undertone of respect, suggesting that whatever decision was looming had been discussed behind closed doors long before the public caught wind of it. This fueled speculation that Rodgers himself may have initiated the conversation, seeking clarity about his role and future. The Steelers, faced with the challenge of balancing tradition and evolution, may have realized that holding on too tightly could do more harm than good. The rumor painted a picture of two powerful entities acknowledging change, even if neither was ready to explain it fully. From a perspective of the locker room, the potential departure of Rodgers represented a psychological shift. Quarterbacks are not just leaders by position, they are emotional anchors. Teammates often draw confidence from their presence, especially one as experienced and composed as Rodgers. The rumor suggested that players were quietly preparing themselves for a new reality, even as they publicly expressed unity. In a spoken, flowing narrative, you would highlight how uncertainty can bond a team just as much as it can divide it. Some players may have seen this as an opportunity to step into new roles, while others likely felt the weight of losing a guiding voice. The Steelers have always emphasized collective strength, and the idea of moving forward without Rodgers tested that philosophy. The official communication, vague as it was, acted like a signal that everyone needed to be adaptable. This was no longer just about one quarterback, but about how the team defined itself moving forward. Speculation also turned toward Rodgers himself and what this moment meant for his personal journey. Known for his thoughtful approach to the game and life beyond it, Rodgers has never been afraid to challenge expectations. The rumor of his exit from Pittsburgh was framed by some as a search for alignment, a desire to be in a situation that matched his competitive and intellectual priorities. In YouTube-style storytelling, this is where you connect the dots between past behavior and present circumstances. Rodgers has always valued autonomy and honesty, And if he felt those were compromised, a change would make sense. The official communication did not confirm motives, but it allowed space for interpretation. Fans began to see this not as an abrupt ending, but as a carefully considered transition. Whether that transition led to another team, a different role, or something entirely unexpected remained unclear, but the sense of deliberation was unmistakable. The Steelers, on the other hand, were portrayed as an organization at a pivotal moment. The rumor suggested that they were evaluating not just personnel, but philosophy. How much longer should they lean on veteran brilliance versus investing fully in a new era? In a narrative meant to be spoken, you would emphasize that franchises often face these decisions quietly, but occasionally they surface in dramatic fashion. The official communication hinted that the Steelers wanted to control the narrative, to frame any change as intentional rather than reactive. This approach aligned with their long-standing reputation for discipline and foresight. Still, the possibility of losing a quarterback like Rodgers forced uncomfortable questions about risk and reward. Fans sensed that the team was preparing for a future that might look very different, and that realization carried both excitement and fear. As a rumor matured, it became less about the immediate shock and more about long-term consequences. What would Rodgers' departure mean for the Steelers' identity, and how would his legacy be remembered in Pittsburgh? In a YouTube-style reflection, you would slow down and acknowledge that legacies are shaped not only by success, but by how endings are handled. The official communication, restrained and respectful, suggested an awareness of this. Neither side appeared eager to burn bridges, which only deepened the sense that this was a thoughtful separation rather than a dramatic fallout. The rumor evolved into a conversation about respect, timing, and mutual recognition of change. Fans began to accept that even icons move on, and that doing so with dignity can be just as powerful as staying. In the final wave of speculation, the focus turned to what comes next, not in terms of specifics, but in terms of feeling. The idea of Aaron Rodgers leaving the Pittsburgh Steelers settled into a quiet inevitability, even without confirmation. In a spoken narrative closing, you would remind viewers that football is a story of constant motion, where even the most stable chapters eventually end. The official communication may have been brief, but its impact was lasting, opening the door to endless interpretation. Whether this rumor proves true or fades into memory, it revealed something important about both Rodgers and the Steelers. It showed that greatness is not static, and that sometimes the most significant moments happen not on the field, but in the spaces between words. But before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to Steelers Nation Central and hit the like button on this video. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest updates on the Pittsburgh Steelers. And don't forget to share your thoughts on the news in the comments below. The rumor did not fade after the initial wave of reactions. It actually gained a deeper tone, almost reflective, as if everyone involved had taken a breath and started to understand the magnitude of what might be happening. In a YouTube-style narration, this is the moment where you lower your voice and speak slower, because the story is no longer about headlines, but about meaning. Aaron Rodgers and the Pittsburgh Steelers began to feel like two powerful forces acknowledging that their shared moment might be reaching its natural limit. The official communication, still echoing in the background, worked almost like a symbolic door left half open. It did not slam shut, but it did not invite anyone to stay comfortably either. Fans started to reinterpret past moments, old interviews, sideline conversations, and subtle body language, all now framed through the lens of possible departure. The rumor suggested that this was not a sudden fracture, but a gradual realization that paths evolve. Rodgers, a quarterback known for understanding the game on a deep mental level, likely recognized that timing matters as much as talent. The Steelers, equally aware of their legacy, may have seen this as a chance to redefine themselves before being forced to do so. The story shifted into something quieter, heavier, and far more emotional than a simple roster change. As the narrative stretched further, it began to feel almost philosophical, touching on themes that go beyond football. In spoken form, This is where you remind the audience that careers are human stories wrapped in uniforms and playbooks. The rumor around Rodgers leaving the Steelers carried a sense of acceptance rather than rebellion. There was no public frustration, no dramatic confrontation, just an atmosphere of contemplation. That silence spoke volumes. It suggested maturity on both sides, an understanding that success does not always mean permanence. For Rodgers, the speculation hinted at a man evaluating his remaining time in the sport with honesty, asking himself where his voice would matter most. For the Steelers, it felt like an organization taking responsibility for its future rather than clinging to familiarity. Fans listening to this kind of narrative would feel conflicted, torn between gratitude for what was and curiosity about what could be. The official communication became less important than the shared understanding forming around it. This was not about loss alone, but about transition, growth, and the courage to acknowledge change before it becomes unavoidable. In the end, the rumor settled into a calm but powerful presence, like a lone note that continues to resonate even after the music stops. In a YouTube closing tone, you would look straight into the camera and emphasize that some stories do not need confirmation to feel real. Aaron Rodgers potentially leaving the Pittsburgh Steelers became one of those stories. It symbolized the constant movement of professional football, where even the strongest alliances are shaped by time, perspective, and evolution. The official communication, brief and controlled, may eventually be remembered as the moment everyone realized something was shifting. Not loudly, not chaotically, but deliberately. Whether Rodgers stays or goes almost becomes secondary to what the rumor revealed. It showed a quarterback and a franchise willing to confront reality with respect. It reminded fans that endings are not always failures, and that sometimes the most powerful chapters conclude quietly, making room for something new. And as any seasoned YouTube narrator would say, this is exactly the kind of story that lingers long after the screen fades to black. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to keep receiving exclusive news about the Pittsburgh Steelers, make sure to subscribe to Steelers Nation Central and give this video a like. We always look forward to hearing your comments and opinions. See you in the next video.